Okay, I am Joe Doucette. I'm the Regional Supervisor for the Conservation Education Division up in northeastern Nevada out of Elko. And I've been here for 20 years, love to fish. I'm also the Angler Education Coordinator for this part of the state as well. This program today is a family program. It's rated PG. Profanity or inappropriate behavior will not be tolerated in the chat or the Q&A. All the box Q&A should be on topic, please. Failing to follow these guidelines will result in you being muted in the chat or Q&A, or if it gets too bad, even removed from the live stream. But from the list of people I'm seeing on here, looks like a good group of people. So we shouldn't have any problems at all. My contact information is there at the bottom of the screen. 775-777-2305 is my office number, and I do have that forwarded to my cell when I'm not in there, so you can always call the office and you'll get me even if I'm in the field. And then jdoucette@ndow.org is my email, and our moderator tonight is the Southern Nevada Angler Education Coordinator, Abby Zarnecki. So if you let's see here. Okay, there we go. So just so you're aware of it, you are automatically muted. Your cameras are off. This is being recorded though, and it will be on the NDOW YouTube. You can use the Q&A, which is right down here, or the chats to ask questions. Right now, I use the chat more than the Q&A. So if you know how to use the chat tab, go ahead and use that for questions. But if you do it in the Q&A, it just zoomed me in. I'm not sure what that means. Anyway, if you use the Q&A, Abby will let me know about those questions as well. And then if there is a thing here where you can raise your hand, let us know you want a question, and we will open for chat, audience participation during the end of it, probably not during it, but towards the end. So what we're going to talk about is fishing northeastern Nevada, and honestly, more specifically, Elko County. That's what this program is primarily about. This is Doug Ouellette, who's out of the Reno area, Truckee River guide. And this is a brown trout he caught a number of years ago out at South Fork Reservoir. And while there are still browns in there, and most of our high desert reservoirs, we're not catching lots of browns. So what we're going to have here, first, we're going to talk about high mountain lakes. I've broken this into 3 different parts. Then we're going to talk about our high desert reservoirs. And then we will talk about some of the small rivers or streams that we have up here. And of course, what we call rivers, the rest of the nation laughs at us and calls creeks and ditches. So the high lake management in eastern Nevada, there are 25 named alpine lakes in the Rubies and East Humboldts, 19 in the Rubies, and 6 in the East Humboldts. So there are 25 named alpine lakes. You're looking at Verdi Lake here. So this is Verdi. Why is it not? Okay. 22 lakes with records of being stocked, and some of the stocking actually dates clear back to 1895. So currently we have 11 established self-sustaining populations. These are mostly brook trout populations. We have 6 established populations that get periodic augmentation. And then we have 6 of the 25 that are declared unsuitable for trout survival. They're just too shallow. They freeze all the way to the bottom in the winter, and you'd have fish kills. So if you add that all up, you're at 22 of 23 of the 25, and there's 2 of them that just we don't have self-sustaining populations or haven't augmented. I'll give you some of these are the Ruby Mountain, high mountain lakes. As you can see here, these are the elevations, with the highest one being Verdi Lake. It's the picture we saw early on. And then next would be Liberty Lake. So some of them, as you see, don't have any fish. Normally it's the shallower ones. Cold lakes, the one that gets the most visitation is right here, Lamoille Lake, and it's got brook trout in it, but I'll just go through these real quickly. Cold Lakes has brook. Cold Lakes actually, I believe, might even have some tigers in it now. Echo Lake has brook and lake trout, and people do every once in a while catch a lake trout out of there. You can see it's 155 feet deep. One of the issues with the lake trout though, and with the depth of the lake, that when they first put lake trout in, they didn't realize about 50 feet down, there is a big change in pH, acts like a barrier. So those fish don't get below that 50, 55 foot range in there. Fab has brook trout in it. Goat Lake has brook. Griswold is one of the ones we stock. Access to it is through Spring Creek Association property, but you can access it from Lamoille Canyon, but that's a heck of a hump over the top of a pretty decent ridge. Hidden Lakes, my favorite fish in the rubies is got cutthroat trout. There's no natural reproduction in there that's been documented, though honestly, I think there might be some, as I've seen some. We haven't stocked it in a number of years, and I've seen some smaller fish in there recently. Island Lake, it gets brook trout, and we did put some bow cuts in there by horseback a couple of years. Same thing with Lamoille Lake, brook trout, but sometime in the past 2 years, we put some bow cuts in there as well. Verdi Lake has brook and lake trout again. Again, it's got that 108 foot deep, that depth there, but it also has that layer where the pH changes about 50 feet down. Lost Lake has cutthroat. North Furlong doesn't have any fish. Overland has brook trout. Overland, it's a little bit of a hump in there from Ruby Valley, but it's a great place to take beginners. We used to take our Boy Scouts in there because even though the fish are very small, they're stunted because it's got lots of fish, but you got a beginner for fly fishing, great place to go. Robinson has brook trout. Robinson and Hidden are next to each other. And the great thing about that is Hidden Lake, if the cutthroat are being finicky and not cooperating, it's about a mile and a quarter hike down to Robinson. And over the last couple of years, the brook trout have really gotten a nice size. Not unusual to catch a 12 or 13 inch brook trout, which is very, very unusual in this part of the state. And then Verdi Lake has cutthroat. It probably has some natural reproduction, and it has some of the larger cutthroat because access is so difficult into Verdi. So I've got the 11 sustaining brook trout populations that are managed as wild fisheries. The 6 augmented populations are managed as unique or quality fisheries. You can see this is a little cutthroat, little Lahontan cutthroat right there. Current stocking program, we stock them by helicopter. Let me go back. Stock them by helicopter roughly every 3 to 6 years. I will tell you because of cost. And most of them have not been stocked within the last 5 or 6 years. So the fish are starting to get a lot larger, but not a lot. If they don't have any natural reproduction, you may have a lot less fish in there as well on those cutthroat waters. Here's some background information on some of the angler use days. Here's the length of the trail in. As you can see, some of them are fairly short. If you go to Lamoille Lake and Island Lake, they're only 2 miles. Of all the ones you have to hike into, they get the most use. You can see that, and here's the number of fish caught. These are a little bit older numbers. I'm probably going to tell you that you could probably double these numbers for this year. I've seen a whole lot of extra use going on, a whole lot of people getting into these areas. And so, it's quite exciting to see people getting back outside and doing this stuff. But again, for those who like to get up there to be by themselves, and you can see that some of them, 16.69 fish for angler, Echo is 38.14. You'll notice the Island and Lamoille are fairly low. And the reason for that is they do get the most pressure. And so the fish are a little more skittish. And again, you see that Overland at 30, Echo 38, though Echo's a real hump in there. But Overland, again, still a hefty hike, but not bad at all. Hidden Lakes, about 7. But again, if you go down here to Robinson, almost 23 fish per angler. Fish per angler day is up around 2.5, 3 fish a day up there. So East Humboldt angler use, you're talking the most accessible one is Angel Lake. It's one of the highest lakes in North America that you can reach by a blacktop road at approximately 8,400 feet of elevation. Again, you're seeing 1322 anglers. And this is based on a return questionnaire, not us actually counting. So it could be off by as much as 20%, but I would double that easily. We stock it like a put and take fishery. It is stocked with brook trout, rainbow trout, and tiger trout. It's a great little fishery. We do Angel Lake Kids Fishing Derby up there every summer. Boulder Lakes, you can see that the fish per angler up here is 10, down here it's 2.5 day per angler. These are the average person spends a little over a day up there. Smith Lake is a great little fishery to get to if you want to get away. It's just it's just around the mountain from Angel Lake, about an hour and a half hike, fairly easy hike, except for the last couple hundred yards. Steel is a bit of a hump in, and Grays is a real hump in. In fact, Grays right now, we're telling people to be careful. The landowner, it's actually a private inholding inside the forest, and the landowner was actually patrolling it, shooing people off. So we're no longer at this point stocking Grays because of that. And you can see some of the fish. Here's one of our our division chief for the habitat division, used to be in fisheries. This is a trout that he caught up in one of the high mountain lakes. And then here's one of those lake trout, Mackinac. This is out of Liberty Lake. And you can see the really big head, snaky body. That's a sign of not a lot of food in there. They were put in to help control the brook trout population. And again, it's not always just the fishing. There's lots of great stuff up there. Bighorn sheep, mountain goats, Himalayan snowcock. In fact, I had my family up a few years ago. We horsebacked into Hidden Lake, and my wife and daughter like to sin late, so I was up having some coffee run one morning, and couple of Himalayan snowcock kind of went right through camp. And then one night my daughter, who is an adult, and I mean, she's not a little kid, she was sleeping in a tent probably about 50 yards away from us, heard a noise, and came to the tent and asked if she could sleep with us. And it was a mountain goat walking around the edge of our camp. Now we're going to talk a little bit about high desert reservoirs. That's me, for those who care to know. That's a South Fork fish. You can see a nice little fat toad there. This is Wild Horse Reservoir. North is actually in this direction. It's not oriented right, but to get it to fit on the picture better, this is the way that I put it on here. Wild Horse is 65 miles due north of Elko. Right now, it's our best fishery out here as far as the high desert reservoirs. Most people are fishing the arms. This is Hendrick's arm, and this is Penrod. There's a place right around here where there's a culvert going underneath, and especially in the spring when you have snow melt and you got a flow coming in, the trout hang right by that culvert, and great fishing. Unfortunately, sometimes you'll see a group of about 8 or 10 float tubes, each taking turns getting in. Once they catch a fish, they back out. The next guy moves in. I almost feel sorry for the fish. There's a bridge you go underneath to get to here. You can actually take a boat, and fishing up in these coves can be really good in the spring. They also hold perch. And so Wild Horse, the main body is out here. State Park's right here. There's a real drop off here. This has been really good. And late this summer, down at this end, by the old road bed, right in here, we were drifting a boat through there, catching some really nice trout as well as some perch. You can see good sized trout. You're looking at those are 20-inch, 19-inch fish, nice and healthy. The one up top's a bow cut. This is a rainbow. You can tell by the spotting. Good friend of mine, Bob Tebow, with a real nice fish at Wild Horse. I think this was a few years ago. And then, of course, Wild Horse also holds smallmouth bass and perch. Now, the perch fishery kind of crashed for a bit during the drought from 2012 to 2015. Lost a lot of spawning habitat. Not to mention the fact the wipers and the bass that are in there to help control them. And so they really they pretty much disappear from harvest. They didn't disappear from the lake, but the last 2 years have really come on strong. Even getting a few anglers complaining about them. I've noticed I don't catch any less trout right now, but I have more action. So I say in the morning I still catch 5 or 6, 15 to 22 inch trout, but I also now catch about 15 or 20, 30 perch in between them. I'm still catching the trout, but just more perch. And I don't like to eat trout, but I love to eat perch. So I carry a little ice chest in my kick boat and throw the trout in there, or perch in there. And then of course, wipers. Now I'll tell you that the wipers here, we've not stocked in a number of years. 2012 or 2013 or 14, I believe we took the limits off the wipers. And so a number of fish, were caught out of there. And so, Abby, somebody raise their hand. Maybe we can open their mic and let them talk. Abby, do you hear me? I don't know how to do that.
See the hand raised.
I saw, well, let's see here. I'll tell you what, I'll do it. So, and I don't know how to pronounce your name, sir, or ma'am, Sual, or
Sujual.
Pardon me?
It's Sujual.
Okay, Sujual, you have a question?
Yeah, what kind of trout is that?
Well, this right here is not a trout. This is a wiper. It's a cross between a white bass and a striped bass. It's a hybrid. They are sterile, which is why we put them in there. Well, they're not sterile. They can't mate with each other. They can mate with a white bass, but they can't mate with each other. And so they're put in there as a biological control for species that reproduce very quickly. We've got some suckers up in there and some chubs. And then also the perch can really overrun a fishery very quickly. And so these help control that. That is not a trout. That is a wiper, W-I-P-E-R. That answer your question?
Yep, that's my question.
All right, cool. Thanks for asking. That's cool. All righty. So they're in there. There's not many. There's tentative plans to put some more in next summer. And so hopefully we can get some of those going again. And so the perch don't take off too bad. And of course, there's channel catfish in there. Very nice. I think the water record there is right around 27, 28 pounds. Those nice big channel cats that we augment every so often. South Fork Reservoir is our most visited reservoir in the area. It's only about 18 miles south of Elko. Takes about 20 minutes, 30 minutes to get there from town. During the summer, it's very, very busy. This time of year, not so much. And so this time of year is actually when the fishing gets really good there as the water cools down and the algae and the weeds die off. The main boat ramp is right up here in this cove up top. There's also a new boat ramp right down here that sometimes is usable, sometimes is not. Right now with the water down the way it is, I don't think it's usable for larger boats. It's usable for smaller boats. This is the inlet end, and the north end up here is the tailwater or the dam up there. It's the most visited state park in our part of the state, and so it gets lots of pressure. Camping all along the beach here, and then camping up here. There is, I'm trying to think where it is. It's probably right in here is the state park campground right in there. Really pretty lake. It's got lots of good fish in it. The fish grow larger depending on who you talk to, but I think that tentatively they grow larger than it's at Wild Horse because there's a lot more natural food in there. And so they, but that is kind of a two-edged sword. Even though they grow larger, the catch rate is much slower because of that. There's another nice trout right there. Smallmouth bass are also in the lake. The largemouth bass have really come on recently. And then it's a great float tube lake when there's not people on there. People come out spring and the fall. This couple here, they're a married couple. They come out pretty much every spring and every fall and fish that south end. If we go back, let me go back to the map. right about here, from here across to here is a buoy line. And that buoy line, everything south of that is a no wake zone. It's for the fishermen. The main river channel kind of runs right in through here. And so a lot of people will actually take their float tubes. And that's kind of where these two people are here, right down there near that river channel at the south end of the lake. We'll move into our small rivers and streams. This is Lamoille Creek up in Lamoille Canyon. Absolutely beautiful if you've never been there. It is called Nevada's Yosemite. It's all glacially carved, some real rugged stuff, but also some great glacial hanging valleys and things like that. And so, but anyway, so the first one, the South Fork, the upper river, the South Fork of the Humboldt upper river, you can see has fish in it. There's some natural reproduction going up in there, but not a lot. There are some brown trout reds, though, with the advent of a big rainbow spawn going up above the river or above the reservoir in the river, the brown trout seem to have taken a back seat there, even though they're fall spawners and the rainbows are spring spawners. The one thing that I've noticed about the browns, during their spawn, a lot of times the flows are extremely low there, and I think that might be some of the issue going on there. The Humboldt River in the lower part of the river, it's got, again, a brown trout fishery, but in the last 5 years has really had a rainbow, wild rainbow fishery come on. It's a great. There's some great reproduction going on with wild rainbows. Also, because it's tailwater, this reservoir that will spill whenever we have a good winter. There's a lot of wipers flushed down in there, a lot of smallmouth and largemouth bass. And that first half mile below the dam, there's a bunch of big pools that this time of year when water flows are very low, the larger fish keg up in those pools. And you can see there's nice reservoir sized fish that get down in there, really pretty river. And so that's a great one in the spring. This time of year, other than the pools, it's not that good. My favorite tailwater right now is the East Fork of the Iwahi River. This is just below Wild Horse Reservoir. And you can see that this was last spring when it was spilling. This was just back in, I want to say it was either March or April. I want to say April. It was April, early May. And they were dumping lots of fish like this into the big pool right below the dam. And let me tell you, even now, the carryover of these fish from last spring, that first half mile of that river is really good fishing. You get a little bit further down below in the river, it starts to get some wild rainbows in there. It's got some pretty good production. So the first half mile is mostly reservoir fish. And then once you get below that, you get into the wild fish. And so it's a great little fishery. This obviously is not a wild fish. This is one of the reservoir fish that have been dumped down. You can tell by the fins. You can see that they're all worn off up here from being in the raceways. But they grow quite large in there. They get really pretty colors. Because of the downstream use, a lot of times during the summer, heat of the summer, because of irrigation, this is one of the few streams that actually has really good fishable flows in the area. And so the sad thing is it doesn't get a lot of use. There's a blacktop road that parallels it for a number of miles. But until a fire a couple years ago, it was so overgrown that it was hard to get into. And so it only got used by fly fishermen who wade in waders, whereas most spin fishermen don't do much wading. After the fire cleared a bunch of the brush out, you see a little bit more use down there, which is good to see. And then we've also got, realized in this part of the state, we've got a number of salmonids that call this part of the state home. And so we'll talk, for example, the Yellowstone up here and the bull trout, and then the red band trout. They all kind of come together right up here in this part of the state. So the red band is a real pretty little trout. We've got some great red band streams. Once you get to those red band streams, and in fact, the tailwater of that East Fork of the Iwahi below Wild Horse is a red band stream, though I believe the reservoir sized fish have pretty much outcompeted them. The really cool thing about the red bands, they keep these big, large, dark par marks into adulthood, unlike our coastal rainbows, which is what most wildlife agencies stock around. This is the Bruno River. It's one of my favorite rivers to fish. It's really pretty. Lots of fish in it. It doesn't get a lot of pressure. This is actually right by the gravel road, or right by the mink ranch here. It's got red bands and mountain whitefish in it. There's a pretty little red band somebody caught right there. And so it's a real pretty little river. These are all the red band streams. You see, once you get up here north of Wild Horse, this is actually outside of the Great Basin. You're in the Columbia River Basin there. So that's what people have to realize. There's 156 red band trout streams and approximately 625 miles of occupied red band stream in that part of Elko County. So this is the East Fork of the Iwahi. Again, I think this main stretch, it's occupied, but not nearly as much as it was with the reservoir fish. These tributaries have more of the native red band in them than the main stem does. The Bruno, like I said, my favorite. You can drive right down here and you get right in here where you follow Lamoille Creek down, and this is where the road crosses it right there. And it's this little stretch right in here, this loop. It's a lot of fun to fish. Leave a vehicle here, leave a vehicle up here, and fish that loop. Also, as you get a little bit higher up here, get north of or south of Rattlesnake upstream, and so that's an area that starts to get a little bit better red band fishing there as well. When you get in all these little tributaries, the fish get a lot smaller, flows are a lot lower, can be a little bit harder to fish. The Jarbidge River also carries red bands. It's known real well for its bull trout, but it also carries red band, and so all of these, all the tribes carry them. And in fact, a lot of times in this West Fork down here by the town of Jarbidge, you're catching mostly red bands. The bull trout aren't till a little bit higher up. So bull trout, you do need to know that how to identify them from the red band. You can see instead of dark spots on a lighter body, it's lighter spots on the darker body. A little bit of the white tip of the fins, though some of the red bands will have white tip fins as well, and no spots on the dorsal fin. So you have to be able to identify these because it is illegal to keep them. They are a threatened species, but you are still able to catch them as long as you release them. People think the bull trout is getting really big. Well, they grow to the size of their environment, and our streams are small. So most of them are going to be anywhere from 6 to 12, 10, 11, 12 inches. So this is the West Fork of the Jarbidge. The main stem is what holds most of them. The yellow is all these other creeks up through here. Jack Creek does seem to hold some, but not a lot. Pine Creek is the trib that seems to hold the most, and the main stem. The higher you get, so the town of Jarbidge is right about down in here somewhere. The higher you get up into the wilderness, if you can get above 7,000, 7,500 feet of elevation, that's when you really start to get into the bull trout. The East Fork is actually has a lot more bull trout in it, a little bit easier to catch, though it is also loaded with red bands. The problem is access. It's really difficult. We went in one time and literally coming in through this side over here, had about 200 feet of rope. You didn't have to climb down, but it was so steep it was hard to walk up and down. But once we got in there, we caught, I don't know, in about 4 hours, we got 50, 60 fish each. Of about 5 were bull trout, the rest were red bands. But again, very steep, rugged terrain, hard to get into, but the fishing is obviously better, as is the case in much of Nevada, where the harder it is and the longer hike in, the better the fishing is. So Elko County has more than 1,200 miles of fishable small streams. You can get 5 of the 6 fish in our native slam right here in Elko County. The only one you can't get is Bonneville's. Belahant and Cutthroat Trout. We have a number of streams. We're the only county you can get Yellowstone Cutthroat Trout in, and we're the only county you can get bull trout in. So 5 of the 6, if you're looking to get our Nevada native fish slam, this is the place to start. Though you will put some miles on the bull trout, or we saw north central Elko County, the Bonneville Cutthroat, very northeastern Elko County, and of course Chris Cruikshank talked about that last night on the Native Slam. And hopefully sometime in the next week or so, we'll have his presentation up on our YouTube channel, so you can go see that. Ruby Lake National Wildlife Refuge is a very popular fishery here. You're looking at the state record rainbow trout. That trout was 16 pounds, 8 ounces, caught February 11th, February 11th, 2011. And people say, oh, he killed it. Well, honestly, it was an 8-year-old fish. We took the ear bone out, called the otolith. They were able to tell its age by that. The average trout dies at 6 or 7. It was at the end of its lifespan. And when you fight a fish like that, depending on the water conditions, everything, as a general rule, it's going to be so tired and stressed. Even if you release it and it swims away, there's a really good chance it won't survive. This is a tiger trout I caught. This is actually New Year's Day. It's one of our few fisheries out here that you can fish open water, because it is fed by a couple hundred springs. So you can always find some open water. This was about a 4-pound tiger trout New Year's Day a few years ago. This was this spring. Brianna caught this beautiful tiger trout in April. You can see there's still snow on the ground, but the locals actually fish the collection ditch here from mid-December to mid-April for trophy-sized trout. Little Mikey Gibbs, he's a friend of one of my granddaughters, and his dog, he fishes this all the time. And here you're getting closer to the actual South Marsh. I'll show you on it. But again, very pretty fish in there. Nice, they grow to very nice size. State record tiger trout was 15 pounds, 11 ounces. Caught the same spring as the state record tiger. So it's a 40,000 acre refuge. It's got 6,000 acres that are really shallow. It's got 7,300 acres that are deeper down at this end. The North Dike units are right in here, and you can fish for bass and some trout along those units. There's a collection ditch that starts up here and parallels the road, and it's a man-made ditch, goes all the way down, comes out here at Brown Dike, and that's where it goes into the South Marsh. It's artificials only. You can fish it year round. It holds really large trout, and but you can't weight it. You can't put a float tube in it. You need a long handled net. Often the water level is 3 feet below your feet. And if you get one of those big fish, you're not getting it out. Another really cool thing people don't realize, down here at this south end, there's a whole bunch of ponds that are formed by the springs. And these ponds can be accessed. You park on the road and just hike down to them. And there's some really large fish that hang in those ponds as well. So most people know this outside of Elko area. If you're not a fly fisherman, they know fish in this area down here. For bass fishing during the summer, it's a real popular bass fishery. And so it's a great place to visit. There's a U.S. Forest Service campground here you can camp in. And then if you get off the refuge property, there's no camping allowed on the refuge property, but there's some cherry stem roads along here you can camp in. And then also if you get up here to Harrison Pass, there's some camp spots up here you can camp to if you want. It's about in the winter, we can't go over Harrison Pass most winters because it's not maintained. During the summer, it's a 65-mile drive from Elko. During the winter, when we fish it, it's generally about 105, 110 miles, a good 2.5 hours in winter driving conditions to get there from Elko. On that, I'll open it up to any questions that you might have. Let me see if I can see the chat here somewhere. We got any Q&A? No questions? And anybody have any questions? I'll tell you what, let me do this. Let's go up here. Let's go to the participants. Since we don't have many people, let's go ahead. We'll go ahead, allow to talk. If you guys can, I'm letting you guys, allowing you to talk. So if you have questions, you can just ask them instead of going through the chat. Might make it a little bit easier.
How many trout species are there?
So in Nevada, you've got the 3 cutthroat trout, and as far as native species, we've got the Bonneville, Lahontan, and Yellowstone cutthroat, and then we have the red band rainbow. The Nevada Department of Wildlife also stocks a hybrid species of a bow cut, which is a cross between a cutthroat trout and a rainbow trout. We also stock brown trout, and then we have wild populations of brook trout. They're not native; they're from the East Coast, but they were stocked back in the early to mid 1900s, and are self-sustaining, and so they can go ahead, and you guys can unmute your mics if you want to talk. I've given you the ability to talk if you want to talk. So those are basically what we have. We also have, NDOW also stocks different strains of rainbow trout. Anybody?
Jeff asked when we think the YouTube link, this link will be up on YouTube.
I would suspect, it's been taking us a while to get them together. I would suspect sometime in the next week to 2 weeks.
Yeah, I was asking the same question too.
Okay.
Probably next week. And if you go to the link I shared in the chat and save that, it'll be under our webinars. This will be part of our webinar series.
And I would highly recommend, especially those of you who are interested in trout, to watch last night's program. Chris Crookshanks, who's our our staff biologist for native fisheries in Nevada, he did a good presentation on native fish slam, and it's a lot of fun to try and fill it. You get a certificate, you can get a hat. You don't have to do it in 1 year or a few weeks. You can take 3, 4, 5 years, however long it takes you to get around the state to catch a different fish. It's a great way to see our different waters. And this is my contact information, jdoucette@ndow.org, 777-2305. I love to talk fishing. Other than travel and my family, fishing's right up there, and I actually get to spend time with my family while I fish, and I get to do some traveling when I fish too. So they all tie in real together. That rainbow you see me holding over here is a New Year's Day rainbow. The Fly Fishing Club here goes fishing every New Year's Day out at the collection ditch at Ruby Lake National Wildlife Refuge. And so that was New Year's Day. Some days it's a beautiful day out. It'll be 40, 45 degrees by noon. 2 years ago, it was 17 below zero when we got out of the trucks at 9 in the morning. So you got to dress for it. You catch big fish. Any other questions? Yeah.
People usually have, do you notice a difference in the rainbow trout, like coloring? Like it's the same species, but sometimes they're lighter or darker.
So we have different strains. There's a number of things that plays into this. Different strains have been developed by different wildlife agencies. Also, food will play a part in that. What they eat will definitely play a part in some of their coloring, their habit, where they live. But for the most part, it just has to do with different strains. Just like horses will have Appaloosas will have certain types of spotting, whereas others don't have the spotting. It just has to do with the strain of the fish, of the rainbow. I will say that when you see these, spots like this over the whole body, that's a rainbow. The hybrid species or the hybrid rainbow cutthroat species will have a lot less spots, just a few across the top. And again, the same thing with the cutthroat species don't have near as many spots. Rainbows will have almost a little X. Their spots will look like a little X. Whereas under the cutthroat species, it's more circular than X-shaped. And so that's another way to tell whether it's a bow cut. Sometimes the bow cuts will have that orange slash or yellow slash under their jaw, that cutthroat slash, but not always. So that's not always an indication.
Why are the native Nevadan fish native?
Well, that means native means, so that's a really good question. I like that. Native means they were here before, they were never introduced by man. They were here naturally. Wild fish may be self-reproducing, but they were stocked by man. So brook trout are from the East Coast. The rainbows are from the West Coast. And so it's really funny. I was fishing in the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee about 5 years ago. Out here, we're removing brook trout to make to help save our native species. Out there, they're removing rainbow trout to save the brook trout. So native means they were here before man put them here. Wild means they're naturally reproducing, but we stocked them to begin with. So brook trout, and even in this part of the state, the only native rainbow is the red band trout. The trout that NDOW stocks are not native to the state of Nevada. Other questions?
To go on that one too, on again, Chris Cruikshank's presentation last night, he has an awesome map that shows all the native species and their natural habitat. So it's really neat to see like the original Lahontan Lake that northern
Lake
Nevada.
Lahontan, yeah, and the Bonneville and the big Bonneville Lake. Yeah, all these big, we have stuff that is remnants of this. So the Great Salt Lake is a remnant of the Bonneville Lake, and Pyramid Lake is a remnant. The Pyramid and Walker Lakes are a remnant, and Lahontan Lake are all remnants of that old Lake Lahontan that covered much of northern Nevada.
How many ancient lakes were there?
Oh, I don't know. I got to be honest. That's like saying how many lakes are there now? There's a lot of lakes in our, look at just the Ruby Mountains. One thing I will say that's unique to Nevada, the only natural lakes in Nevada are in the mountains. At our lower elevations, all of the lakes are man-made, and they were made for irrigation purposes, except for South Fork Reservoir just outside of Elko. And that was actually built back in the late 80s for recreation. It's the only impoundment lake or reservoir in Nevada that was built strictly for recreation. So it was one of the few lakes that still had lots of water in it during the drought because they couldn't take water out of it for irrigating. So that was that helped save. That became during the drought of 2012 to 2015-16. That was the best fishing in the area because it held the most water. Whereas like Wild Horse was built for irrigation, and it got down to only 10 or 12% of capacity, and we lost a lot of fish out of there because of that. All right. If there's no more questions, I want to thank you all for coming. Really appreciate it. Feel free to email me or call me with any other specific questions you might think of later. Would love to chat with you about fishing. I love to fish, and appreciate you all showing up and participating. Thank you very much. Have a great evening, and be safe out there.